Hello and welcome to the webinar. This is webinar 3 in the Aegis 360 Business Acumen series. Today's webinar is on hiring and recruiting acumen with Ned Parks and Catherine Burek. Take it away, Ned.
Thank you, Ann. Appreciate it. Catherine, welcome to the show. Glad you're here.
Hey, Ned, it's great to see you.
It is great to
glad
see
to be here.
I'm glad you're here. So I'm Ned Parks. I'm founder of Aegis 360 Consulting, and my guest today is Catherine Burek, the interview doctor. Catherine and I have known each other quite a long time, and she brings a really fresh perspective to this whole idea of recruiting and hiring folks. So we're going to dive into that a little bit. We could probably do 2 or 3 hours on this topic. I know occasionally, Catherine, we get together and wind up in a dual rant about all the things that go wrong here. and I guess I want to say, anybody listening in, if you are guilty of any of the things that we talk about, that's not a sin because you didn't know. Just fix it. It's okay. If you don't know, you don't know. You might listen to something and go, oh my gosh, we do that, or we shouldn't do that, or we should do this. And what we like to say is, okay, fine, just fix it. It's just not a big deal. So let's kind of talk a little bit about this whole idea of business acumen, which is something that we here at Aegis are spending a great amount of time working on with our clients. And we just call it, this is our definition for it. It's the ability to connect all the disciplines of the business, everything. And hiring is obviously one of those. And then take whatever initiatives you need to take to make good decisions and good business decisions. And what we're going to try to do today is not only talk about just the nuts and bolts of hiring and recruiting, but how does that impact other areas of the business, both positively and negatively. And oftentimes, unfortunately, it can be very negative. So this is what our model looks like. We have 8 different areas that we work in, and today we're going to kind of be in that human resources arena with the hiring and the acumen. The hiring and the recruiting. That's normally where it falls under. I know that there's some really large firms that it's kind of an extension of that, but I would say 99 times out of 100 it falls within the realm of HR for sure. It certainly touches it. There's no question about that. So, Catherine, let's just kind of have a little bit of a high-level discussion about this whole idea of recruiting and hiring people. What are companies really trying to do when they say we need to hire a person? What is really kind of at their doorstep, I guess is the question.
Usually what's at their doorstep is a problem. There's some sort of issue or problem or a piece of their process that the company needs to fix or implement or design or take care of in some way. No company is going to hire anyone just because there used to be a person in that job. There's no hiring just for the heck of it. So there's usually, I like to think of it as a problem that they're trying to solve.
So this is a form of problem solving, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because if you start to think about it in terms of problem solving, then you start to get to the root of how are you going to hire the right person. It's not just a matter of filling a position with a body quickly. It's a question of finding the right person who can solve your problem. Very pointed and very on purpose, purposeful.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Yeah. And then, when I talk to folks on the hiring side, they lament a lot about it's difficult, they get ghosted by candidates, and depending upon the level of candidate you're talking about, some folks have said, we make them fill out the application here because we find out they can't read and write, and that's a requirement of the job, and they can't pass a drug test, and so on and so forth. And without going down the rabbit hole of a drug test, that's beginning to change quite a lot as just marijuana becomes more and more prevalent and more legal across the country. Companies are having to go back and relook at that whole criteria and say, gee, many Christmas, how do we deal with this and what do we do? And a lot of them don't have answers yet.
This is true. A couple of years ago, I did I did some consulting work for a small company in the community, and I said, well, you need to have, it was an HR audit, you need to have a drug testing. And the owner said, no, we don't. We don't want drug testing, because he's one of those folks that's one of the investors in the Ohio-based marijuana program. So
Right.
it is a complete change in how you look at candidates. It actually is a relief in some ways, forcing the employer, the hiring manager, to focus on the direct needs of the business. So you will have a screening that encompasses what's the most important thing so that this candidate can solve the problem and achieve the wonderful result that we're looking at. So from my point of view, it is all tied together in with the organization's strategic planning in a very concrete fashion.
Okay, that's interesting. And it would be tied in, wouldn't it? Because if you wanted to advance into this area that you maybe don't have a lot of expertise in, I better hire some expertise in that area. Or if I'm going to expand in this area, I may need to increase my expertise in that area, or whatever it may be. And it doesn't matter what that area it is. It could be geographic, it could be industry-led, it could be your product line or a new product line. I mean, that runs a huge gamut of what that might look like.
A new process, yes, absolutely.
Process, absolutely. So, and this is a little bit of the choir preaching back to the preacher, but I'm going to ask you a question kind of in the reverse. How important is culture in this, and the culture of the organization, and making the person fit?
You know, it's one of the most important things. When I coach candidates now, after many, many years of working as a human resource executive, and what I like to think about is, I like to think of it in this way. Every hiring manager, all of you listening out there, and Ned, you as a hiring manager, me as a hiring manager, we're trying to answer 3 questions, just 3 questions. Can they do the job? Will they love the job? And will they get along with the team? Now, most hiring managers are absolutely unconscious of this choice. But when you are in the hiring process and you get to a certain place and you say, ooh, there's something, yeah, I know that person's qualified, but I don't know. That's about fit. If you don't bring in the right person to fit with the rest of the team, then you're introducing a disruptive element into an organization that might be running fairly smoothly. Then you have all sorts of other problems that were unanticipated. Not only are you less likely to solve the problem that induced you to hire someone in the first place, but you've got all of the rest of your very valuable team all upset, and you've got people in and out of the office complaining, not focused on solving the business's problems or to achieve the results that you want. So every organization must understand the kind of person who will fit best in their organization, just as every candidate needs to do the same, helping out the hiring manager to say, ooh, yeah, I don't think I'll fit here.
Yeah.
In my family, we call that my kind of crazy. So it's the place where you fit and you feel comfortable and you can't explain it. It's because you're my kind of crazy.
So Catherine, you talked about those three essential things. I'd like to move into kind of that first piece here that we say, hey, come join us, right? And we see it all the time, and we see billboards and advertisements, we're a great place to work, and then the candidate comes, and sometimes they get a conflicting message. Not that maybe they're not a great place to work, but then the message sent in the hiring process begins to fall apart. And I want to kind of delve into that a little bit and get whoever is listening to this to try to really adjust and change the way they go about thinking about that. So you talked about a problem that needs to be solved. And I know that in one of your trainings with a client of mine that I sent you in, you used this really interesting case study that really, it was so clear to me. Once I saw it, I went, oh my gosh, I get it now, right? And it was kind of an epiphany for me. You used a case study of, and I don't know if it was real or if you just were really good at making it up, but with your experience, it doesn't matter. A company was going to hire a CFO. And the background is that they were going to go through a really major change in their pricing structure, which meant that not only did the CFO have to crunch the numbers and come up with it, but the CFO then, either be he or she, doesn't matter, was going to have to then educate and get the sales team on board to go to the clients for this big pricing change structure. So kind of unfold a little bit about what you want people to look at in that instance, between what I call skills and experience, and then competencies, and then certainly the other bucket would be culture, just do you fit. But let's just stay with the skills and experience, and then the competency piece.
So in that example, that is a very powerful example, because people think they know what a CFO does. For example, let's stick with that example. A CFO has certain responsibilities across every organization. So if an organization selects a job description off of the internet that says this is what a CFO does, and they put it out there for candidates to look at, they're definitely missing the point. This brings me to one of my major pet peeves. You must understand exactly what you want. So in that case, what they needed was a CFO who could do all of the things that a CFO does, but they needed to have that added skill, that ability to get things done through influence, the ability to understand complexities and explain them to people on the team, so that he could or she could be convincing to get a new project or initiative implemented. So I think start with the problem that's needed to be solved. In this case, it's a new pricing strategy that must be implemented and designed and implemented so that the organization accepts it. This is a very important problem, and a problem that is definitely designed to cause conflict. What are the skills necessary, competencies is what they're called, the skills, knowledge, skills, and abilities and behavior that's necessary to achieve that problem? Well, the typical CFO strengths are being orderly, process improvement, getting reports, being able to be a good communicator, and analysis of financial information. But this other skill that's necessary in order to achieve that pricing project is someone who's comfortable with conflict, can get things done through influence, a big team player, maybe some excellent communication skills like listening and explaining. When you have those kinds of skills, that's a different kind of a CFO. That kind of CFO is not your average bear. So if the job description includes the information about the special needs in this particular job, then candidates who like that sort of thing are going to be attracted, and candidates who don't like that kind of skill, and there are many CFOs who would not be comfortable doing that, those people will be repelled by the posting, by the advertisement, by the description of the job. So starting from before you put a job description out there, you must know exactly what you want, what is the wonderful outcome, the critical success factor that's necessary, that you can measure, that is the achievement, and then what does it take to achieve that goal? That will lead you to the competencies, which will allow you to describe the job better to the candidates so that they can choose for themselves who is going to be the best person. Does that make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And I think what you're also saying is when we decide we're going to fill a position, we have to just sit down and think about it and have a conversation about it, not just, hey, we need to hire a new production manager. Let's really take a look at what's going on. And one of the other things you and I have talked about in the past is very possibly the production manager we're hiring today needs to have a different background, competency, skill set, experience level, or whatever from the one that just left us after working here for 15 or 20 years. And oftentimes, you know, when you said that to me, it was like, oh yeah, they're just trying to replicate Bob or Susan who just left. But the problem is Bob or Susan kind of grew up with the company, and now the company's here, and maybe Bob or Susan never really caught up to where here is, so we need something entirely new. Or maybe the whole job has changed and we can go a completely different route. Maybe Bob and Susan did such a great job that we could actually get an entry-level person into that production manager, or somewhat entry-level, or a newer person, because they had processes so well defined. So oftentimes I find people trying to replicate who just left or run away from it, one or the other. I don't want anything like that person, or I want a replica of that person. And so what I'm hearing you say is we have to sit back and say, let's look at where we are now and what kind of a person we need today. Is that right?
Absolutely. You're thinking, you start with a blank sheet of paper and you say, what is the problem? What is the outcome that we're looking for? This is a very typical Lean Six Sigma process improvement strategy, actually. So we're taking the application of process improvement from every other department in the organization, and we're applying it to a process that involves people. You can say with a blank sheet of paper, this is what we need. This is what would be the wonderful outcome that will happen when we hire the right person. What does it take to achieve that outcome? Those are the competencies. That's what we're looking for. Frankly, I think that at least 80% of the job search time ought to be spent on this part. I can't tell you the number of times companies change their mind midstream. They might post a job, and they might see a candidate that they think is just lovely. This is a person maybe that they would love to have a beer with. That is not the right person. Replicating Frank or Sue, that's not the right person either. The right person fits a very specific description of a person who can solve the problem that the organization has. What does that look like? When you think in this way, starting with a blank sheet of paper, you also open yourself up to a far wider applicant pool. If you're not trying to replicate Sue or Frank, what else? Where else could that person be? What kinds of skills and experiences can they bring that will help you solve this problem? Like our CFO example. Does the CFO have to be just strictly a numbers person? Or could the CFO have a kind of a variety of backgrounds? And where could we find that? Could we potentially find that array of skills in a smaller organization and maybe bring in somebody into our larger organization and give them a growth experience because they've had such a wide variety? You have so many advantages when you think with a blank sheet of paper on what you want instead of just trying to replicate something or selecting a generic job description off of the internet, which so many companies do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. They just find it different. They find them difficult to write, don't they? They just give up.
Yeah.
They just go, grab this one. I'm not sure they even read them.
Well, there is a legal place for job descriptions. That is not the place for job search. You start with maybe you take a generic job description. Maybe you haven't read it for a long time, but do this exercise of getting a blank sheet of paper saying, what is the outcome? What is the critical success factor? What does it take to achieve that? Those are the competencies. And then that's where you will build your job posting. It could look completely different from the job description.
Wow, that changes everything for people and for their companies and who they're trying to hire. So let me shift gears with you a little bit. Let's get to the actual application process. We've put it out there. We've posted it, LinkedIn, Indeed, Glassdoor, wherever we post jobs now. They're all over the place, right? Yeah. Job Frog. I just found another one the other day. Job Frog. I have no idea. Zip Recruiter.
I haven't heard of that one either, but yeah.
They're everywhere, right? It's just,
they
just pop up like they're just everywhere.
Whack-a-mole.
It's like whack-a-mole. Yeah, you don't know where to look. And then this is especially true for the unseasoned job hunter, right? The person right out of college or the person that's been in their job for 30 years, they haven't looked for a job forever. Now all of a sudden they're having to do this. The real pros can probably answer this, right off the top of their head. But they go online and there's all this easy apply stuff, and then it says you have to have a cover letter, and then you upload your cover letter, and then some say we don't want a cover letter, and then some want you to fill out this online form, but then you have to upload your resume along with it, and it's very confusing. Why are they asking me? It's all on my resume. Why can't they just read my resume? Why am I filling out this form? So there's this monster out there that I think has been a scourge to the hiring world called applicant tracking systems. I think it's one of the biggest shams out there. And if anybody listens, this isn't that business, go ahead and call me. I don't care. You're going to tell me how yours is so much better. And, and the sad thing is, I think many of these are actually pretty good, and I think they're really misused. I don't think the companies that use them have a clue what these things will do for them or how to make them work. So just briefly tell us, what is this ATS? And that's what it's called, the lingo in the business. What is it actually doing, or what can it do in many cases?
Well, applicant tracking systems were introduced, oh gosh, I think 10, 15, 20 years ago, as a way to help human resource departments automate their functions, automate their process. It's designed, or theoretically supposed to be, a time saver. The applicant tracking system that you select, and there are hundreds of different systems, you introduce that. It goes in between the candidate and the company. So the candidate will fill out this application on the applicant tracking system. It enters a portal, and then somebody potentially, possibly, supposedly, theoretically, is looking at these resumes. Now, a candidate, from the candidate's perspective, and I will come back to the company's perspective. From the candidate's perspective, there is about approximately a 4 to 9% chance that any individual candidate will get a job from an applicant tracking system. Most likely.
Stop. 4 to 9%.
Yes.
Holy mackerel, Andy.
So it's terrible.
So people are spending hours upon hours putting out hundreds and hundreds of applications, and they have a 4 to 9% chance of getting an interview or getting a job.
Getting a job.
Oh my God. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. That's just pathetic.
Yeah.
All right, go ahead.
This is many applicants will talk about, candidates will talk about the black hole, and the black hole is where the resume goes to die. And that's because the applicant tracking systems are set up by the company. Someone is setting them up and saying, we want to look at candidates with these kinds of skills and abilities. Possibly they're putting in some competencies. They're putting in barrier questions that will screen people out. So the candidate cannot be exactly sure what the applicant tracking system is looking for. There's also the possibility, there have been an increase in number of applicants to every job, which is one of the reasons why a company is looking for any way that they can to reduce the amount of effort involved. So they're screening out candidates right and left with these screener questions. ZipRecruiter and Indeed both talk about them in their commercials. If you keep your eyes open, you can see them talking about it. And this is what they mean. So the company cannot be sure that they're getting the best candidate at all. They're not even sure that, because they could be screening out the right candidate without even knowing it. This is the other thing I wanted to say about applicant tracking systems is I forgot. Goodness gracious! So they're screening out candidates. You can't tell what is going to be involved, and you have a very low chance of getting through as the candidate. Now here's another fun statistic: 60% of jobs are not posted at all. These are jobs that the company wants to fill through referrals and recommendations. And a candidate has a 60 to 80% chance of getting a job from networking, from talking to people. And yet the applicant tracking system has put a barrier between talking to anyone in the company. Candidates think that this is the way it should be done. Companies think that this is the way it should be done, when in actuality, hiring managers, you're sitting out there listening to this, you know in your heart that you would feel so much more comfortable hiring someone that came recommended. There's such a high risk in hiring. I mean, I think I have one of the world records of hiring the worst employee in the whole world. I mean, fortunately he didn't work for me, but I was there, I was on the team, and it was horrible. And it just brought home to me many years ago, this happened in like 1996, many years ago I learned that there's such a huge risk to hiring. So if you want to increase the chances that you find the right candidate, that comes with a referral or recommendation from someone you trust, then you really are not getting your best use out of an applicant tracking system. You are more likely to be able to get this from speaking to your colleagues, putting out referral bonuses inside your company, and using networking services like LinkedIn, where you can access passive candidates who might be perfectly qualified, but who might not be applying for your job.
So, so what the recruiters need to be doing, and in some cases I think the recruiters understand this better certainly than the hiring manager. A company large enough to have a full-time recruiter probably gets this, because they're much more willing to have an open-ended conversation, because they might be filling 40 different jobs in the company, where a hiring manager is filling one for one department. So it's a little bit different that way. But you know, it's interesting that you put this out there, and yet you and I just yesterday were having this conversation. You and I both have had it happen to us just within the last couple of weeks. We knew of a candidate we thought would be really worthy of your interview. I don't know that they'd be the best person for the job. That's not a decision for me to make. But I can tell you this is a quality candidate. This is somebody you absolutely should at least interview, at least know what you're saying no to. And they know and trust us. I mean, we have a whole different relationship, and we reach out, and they're like crickets. They don't even respond back to us, let alone call the candidate. And it's like, if it didn't make it through our little filter, then we're not going to do anything with it. So they're letting a computer make their hiring decisions for them.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. They're letting the computer make a hiring decision. They're hoping and praying that they're programming the computer. You know, computers are toasters, right? So what goes in comes out. So they're hoping that they put the correct input in so that they would yield the correct candidate. And sometimes they do, and a lot of times they don't. Like the candidate that we were talking about, totally skipped over by an unimaginative company representative.
Right.
It's very frustrating, isn't it? But the interesting thing about this whole thing is the tie-in to business acumen, and I hope you don't mind if I go there right now, because
do it.
Because if you have a problem that you're trying to solve inside your company, maybe you need to achieve smooth logistics, and you need a supply chain person to help with that. Maybe you have a customer problem area. Maybe you need to run a smoother, tighter sales function. That's a problem that an organization is trying to solve. And you're going to leave the solution to your business problem to a computer?
Yeah. Well, and then few companies actually will widen the scope. So I've got one client right now, and I think they do a pretty good job. Actually, I'm pretty impressed. But when they've got it narrowed down to bringing people in for interviews, the leadership team is a part of the whole interview process. And then they get back. I mean, they don't hire by committee, but they hire by input, is the way I would say. The plant manager says it's still my choice. I'm the last call on this. So you know, if all of you said no, I'm not gonna you know, be stubborn and bring that person in. But if one of you says no, we're gonna have a conversation about why, and I may overlook that and drive on because I have a bigger picture, right? And I'm fine with that piece of the process. Yeah. You know, I know a company that does this, and they hire people that have to drive vehicles. And so one of the qualifying questions, do you have a current driver's license? And then they have another restriction that if you've had a DWI within 3 years, they can't get you insured. So those two questions are the only thing that they have on theirs that stop it right there. It's like you're not going to go in. You get the automatic rejection letter, right?
Well, that makes sense. That makes perfect sense.
Perfect sense to me. Agreed. Absolutely. It makes perfect sense to me. Now, I think there's another issue where maybe I have a job internally that they don't have to drive a vehicle that they still might be a good candidate for, so I miss out on that. But you know, you can't cover all your bases, but those sorts of things, I'm fine with that. I'm completely okay with that. So let's talk a little bit about the time factor on this. You know, the black hole. I know that a millennial that you and I both know hits the submit button and then kind of looks at the computer and goes, gee, where did it go? And the other thing that these companies do, and this is just enough to make me want to peel the front of my face off, they don't even set this ATS up to do an automatic response that they have received the application. Thank you for putting in your application, blah, blah, blah. It's automatic. They do it one time. They don't even set that up. And to me, that's just pure laziness is all that is. I can't call it anything else. If you haven't set it up, you're just being lazy. If people want an acknowledgement that, just talk to me. And if we're hiring millennials now, they've been hitting the button and getting a response. Friend me, you're friended, right?
Yep.
Connect, you're connected. And so they hit this button and something's supposed to happen. And it's not hard to fit. You can complain about it, but if you want to hire younger people, you had better communicate with them, or they're gonna go, these people wouldn't even talk back to me. It's stunning. So talk about the time of this piece here.
There's two things you're bringing up. You're bringing up the concept of timeliness and the concept of communication. Let's talk about communication first, and remind me to come back and talk about timeliness. Okay. So in the olden days, before applicant tracking systems, we used to call those letters TBNT. Thanks, but no thanks. And we had a variety of letters, and we would make sure we made sure that they went out at periodic times. So the first one would be whether we didn't want if they weren't qualified immediately. Then it's if we decided that we weren't going to bring them in for interviews, and so on. Now, any kind of a computer system ought to be built upon the process in which you want to replicate. So they're not setting it up. That's true. I can point to candidate after candidate after candidate among my clients where they get no response. They interview and they're told everything is great. I think you're wonderful. We have one more step. Months can go by. Months can go by before they hear anything, if they ever hear at all. They could be told, you are in our top 2. I've got to get back to you. I'll get back to you 2 days. And months will go by there as well. And they might or might not get an offer. There have been times where candidates were told, you are my candidate. I'm going to get you a written offer. And it takes 6 weeks to get, in one case, to get a written offer after a verbal offer.
6 weeks?
What? Oh, yeah. Yes. One of our friends collaborates with a job seekers group, and she was telling me about that. And the guy, I met the guy finally. He's like, yep, 6 weeks. So that leads us to this question of timeliness. So you've got a communication problem, which is undermining the company's brand. Absolutely undermining the company's brand. So they don't talk to you. You're used to a more immediate communication, even as not a millennial. We're used to immediate response, right? And you're not getting it. So you're going to start thinking pretty poorly about the company. If this timeliness thing happens and you drag on this interview process, this hiring process for weeks and months, what is the company to do? What is the candidate to do? The candidate moves on. This is why companies get ghosted, because if you were to explore someone who's a company complaining about being ghosted, I would allow that it's probably an organization that took a long time in their hiring process. They allowed a great candidate that they liked, eventually wanted to hire, to find other opportunities. So what happens then? What is the opportunity if this is an opportunity cost, actually? So the opportunity cost is that it takes so long you lose candidates. It takes so long your needs change. It takes so long that candidates ghost you when you're ready finally to make an offer. What is the value of saying, having this all shortened into a tiny, short period of time? This is what we want. Let's have a meeting. We figure it out. We write it up. We get it approved. We put it out there. We do some networking. We review some resumes. We bring some people in for hiring, for interviews, and we make a decision right away. The other portion of the opportunity cost is that while you're goofing around with this hiring process for months, who's doing the work of the person that you're trying to hire? How is that problem being solved in the intervening time? It's not. It's not. So you've got brand problems because you're annoying your candidates. Your candidates are leaving you because you're not going fast enough. And in the meantime, the entire team that this candidate is either going to lead or participate in is struggling to cover the empty hole of the problem. The problem is not getting solved. It's a shame.
And let's not forget, when you bring up the brand piece, which, by the way, this is where it connects to one of those other pieces of my business acumen wheel called marketing and sales. And people think it doesn't. It 100% connects. That the candidate, especially younger candidates, go on places like Glassdoor and they say, they leave a review of a 1-star, and then they eviscerate this horrible hiring experience they had. And what's scary to me is how many others read that and go, I'm not even going to look there. They don't even look. Forget about the fact that it's 4 or 9% that you run through the gauntlet that you only hire. They're not even looking. You're not going to get the benefit of that look ever, ever.
It's you reap what you sow, and so some organizations dearly deserve that reputation, and they've earned it.
They've earned it.
They've earned it, and they have been training candidates how they will be behaving. Right? They're training the candidates.
I talked to a hiring manager probably a little less than a year ago now about a position, and I just casually said, I go, okay, you've selected your person. How do you guys? And this is a large organization. I mean, large. I said, how do you guys communicate with the people that you interview that don't get the job? And the hiring manager looked at me and she said, I'm so disgusted with our HR department right now, I could spit nails. I said, why? And she said, well, I said to them, do we send out a standard letter, or do I need to get my letter approved by you guys that we're not going to offer you a position? And the HR stood to them and said, well, if you really want to send out a letter, I guess that's fine. But when they don't get an answer from us, they know they didn't get the job.
Oh yeah, I've heard it.
Now this is a person that works in a marketing and sales role, and they were like, they said, I'm absolutely mortified. This is the message that's getting put out there about our organization. So how many of these people am I going to try to sell to 2 years from now?
Yep. So yesterday I was telling you
sales go harder.
Yesterday I was telling you a story about a friend of mine, and she's retired now. She held a very, very high-level technical position with a major defense company in this area where we live. And she was describing how earlier in her career she was treated in a way she felt was very poor by a company in a hiring process. She got another job and everything was fine. And she spent the next 30 years of her career never purchasing that company's product.
Wow.
Ever. People hold grudges. Candidates hold grudges. So for every dollar that organization is spending in marketing their business, in having a social presence, in having the proper content out there, they're throwing away in the other pocket by the way that they treat people, because people remember. And they tell their friends,
and
they tell Glassdoor.
A lot of these really big companies that have, and one company here has an actual, what they call the command center, the social media command center. It's manned 24 hours a day with multiple people. They've got screens all over the place. They are on every single social network out there, except the ones that talk about hiring people. They do not monitor that one. And I casually said to the senior vice president, I said, so do you monitor Glassdoor? And he didn't even know what I was talking about. And I said, well, you might want to go take a look, because there's some really bad things being said about your company over there that you guys need to manage. And I thought he was going to throw up his breakfast. He said, oh my God. And we got into this conversation, and I said, you have no idea what the hiring department is doing and the message they're sending to the public, the wider public, and the trashing you're taking out there. Because I'd gone and looked, and I said, it's bad. It's really bad. I worked for a guy who told me, he said, Ned, in this company we do high hiring and high firing. and I didn't know what that meant. And he said, we have very specific ways that we go about hiring, and we we explain the entire gauntlet, and they called it a gauntlet. They were very honest about it, but they were honest up front, right? We do this, we do this, we do this. And they said, and we tell them it takes this amount of time for this level of job, right?
Yeah.
And they said, we will have an answer to you. If you go through all these, you'll have an answer either somewhere through the process or after the last step, you'll have an answer by here. And he said, and we're adamant about holding to that. They had it laid out on paper, and it was for management jobs and above. I mean, not a factory job that they would move a lot quicker. But it involved a lot of, testing and, meeting with this person and a couple trips down there. And it took probably, I'm going to guess maybe 5 weeks to get hired, but there was something every week. There was the initial interview, and then there was like 2 days later, so-and-so would like to meet with you now. And then there was this, and then, we've taken it to the place where we want to send you to a full day of some assessment at an assessment center. And then, and then the answer came back like 2 days later, hey, we want to send you I mean, they were absolutely adamant about it. So high hiring, it was long, arduous, but they told you up front, this is how we go about it. So you knew there was no question about what was going to happen next. And it was laid out on paper, and they handed it to you. Then we in those days, it was before the days of the internet and cell phones and whatnot, if you fired somebody for a performance issue, just a standard performance issue, you were not allowed to fire them on a Friday. You fired them on a Monday through Thursday because the next day was a full work day of them finding a new job and getting their unemployment. And nobody got argued on their unemployment. And they were told that in the termination. This just didn't work out. Your performance isn't here. Tomorrow, go to the unemployment office. Here's the address. We will sign off on your unemployment. I mean, that's just how we did. It was high firing. It was, Ned, we're not trying to make people homeless here. It's just not working for our business. And they packed all of those costs into the whole process. They knew what it was going to cost them. He goes, I know what it's going to cost me when I hire somebody, what it's going to cost me to terminate them if I have to, and I factor that all into it. And then we can be 100% professional about it. And I always appreciated that. And I just had someone near and dear to both of us get turned down for a job back, I guess now in the springtime, early springtime. Maybe it was even last fall. But it was interesting. The company was so incredibly professional. Everything they said they were going to do, they did it on the spot. Before the interview, they sent a packet to the house to this individual with a list of their benefits and how they did things. And a whole page, and then an agenda of what the interview process was going to look like, right down to the minute. You'll arrive at 11:50. Right? At 12 o'clock, you'll sit with this person for this amount of time. Then you'll sit with this person. Then you'll be with this person. Then you'll be back with the original person. And you'll be out of here by 4:15 in the afternoon. I mean, and they did it exactly. And then it was a very professional letter, thanks, but no thanks, right? Well, what was really interesting is the candidate was pretty impressed. Disappointed they didn't get the job, but impressed. I was impressed. And one of the people on the hiring team, I got a call about from another person I know. Hey, Ned, I know that you know this person because I see that you're connected with them on LinkedIn. Do you know them well enough to give me some background because I'm thinking about hiring them for a job? And what was interesting? I talked about this process and how professionally, she was the main recruiter, and how professionally she handled it. And I said, that impressed me, and I told him why. And he sent me a message 2 days ago and said, we've hired her. And not all of it was based upon what you said, but a large amount. Because we wanted that level of professionalism. I thought that was really cool. I really did. So
it's unusual, but it happens. And when it happens, you just want to give someone a hug. Well, pre-COVID days, you want to give them a hug. Yeah.
So Catherine, we're coming up on 15 minutes to go here, and we want to end on time. So I got a few things I'm going to throw, some pictures I'm going to throw up here, and I want you to just kind of talk about what they are as far as how do we go about helping these organizations do better at their hiring. So let's talk about this one here.
So this represents knowing what you want. 50 to 80% of your hiring time should be spent on figuring out what you want so that you have a clear idea of the problem you're trying to solve, the wonderful outcome that can happen when you hire the right person, and the competencies that are necessary to achieve those goals. That's what that represents.
So my
Foundation.
analogy here is I spend a lot of time aiming, and actually throwing the dart only takes a second.
Exactly. If you've got it planned, like in the example that you just gave about that company spent a lot of time in preparation. And once they were prepared, then it was a bang, 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 bang. Everything could flow smoothly after that. But it was only because they were well prepared. They knew what they wanted. They knew the outcomes, so they could create the questions, which we'll talk about in a minute. And they were able to move smoothly and quickly and with solid communication because they knew what they wanted.
Okay. All right, here's our next one.
This is representing the way that you're going to find people. So you want to, yeah, that's right. Being clear about your advertising. So your advertising is the kind of a posting that you use. So don't use the generic post. Don't use the generic job description, because although a job description has a wonderful legal place in every organization, it is not appropriate for the job posting, because you don't know from a generic job description what is the wonderful thing that is necessary to be done. A good, solid, beautiful marketing posting will also describe the kind of culture that you're looking for. So I once did a job posting, created a job posting for a company that had a very unique culture. They were looking for a salesperson who was absolutely a hunter, but had to have certain other characteristics, and they were not finding them. They were just finding generic salespeople. And so I designed a job description that talked about, we want a hunter. You've got to be able to have this kind of personality and behavior. We're hard driving, and we only got 6 applicants, but they were all wonderful. So it comes from the kind of marketing that you're doing for your job. And also this, by knowing what you want, you're able to start doing some of your marketing through networking, for example, on LinkedIn, to find people who are in your geography, who have those competencies, who are able to fulfill your job requirements.
Well, and the other thing I think about here is that old-fashioned, we've heard it forever, truth in advertising, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so one of the things that I find completely a mess out there is I don't think companies have a clue what associate level means, what entry level means, what senior level means. I don't know if they think it equates to the job, the title, the time of experience, or whatever. But it's I found an organization recently that was looking for a candidate, and it was listed. Not only did it come up when you searched entry level. So we searched entry level like in LinkedIn or Indeed or any of these, just give me all the entry level jobs. The only way that they're going to come up is if the company inputs it as an entry level job. Then when you look at their form, it said entry level. But when you read it, they wanted 8 to 10 years experience. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I don't know what book you read, but that's not entry level, right? So I actually know the HR person. I called him on the phone. I go, hey, I just, stumbled across this job. Oh yeah, do you know anybody that's interested? I said, well, actually I do, because a friend of mine asked me if I knew anything about it, so that's why I went to look for it. I said, you realize this is an entry-level job? Oh no, it's not. It's senior. I go, oh, you didn't understand what I said. I said, you search for it under entry level, not only does it come up that way, but clearly in your description, it says entry level. And I said, the guy that asked me about it said, if they can't do any better than that, I don't want to work for them. Yeah. And it was stunning to me. And I thought this poor woman was going to have a heart attack. And I know what they did. They went copy paste. They did copy paste, and they didn't look at anything else, and they shoved it out on the internet because they didn't have a process, right?
And then they complain because they're not getting the right candidates.
Correct.
But that's because they didn't start with knowing what they wanted and describing it in a way that will attract the right candidate. Yeah. It's a big shame. What a waste of energy. This is a pure example of an opportunity cost that is completely avoidable.
Costing them a Well, let's go to our next one.
This is one of my favorite topics. This is representing the questions that they should be asking. Anyone can find the 30 most frequently asked questions. It is available for free on my website. Those questions like, what are you looking for? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Totally irrelevant to almost every job. Totally. It's a complete waste of time. What are you learning? You're not learning anything. And besides that, I prepare candidates to respond to those questions all the time. So you're not getting anywhere near a clear understanding of what that person can do. So this is what leads us to the concept of behavioral interview questions. Tell me about a time when. Now, this is about the easiest kind of question to create because you've done your planning. You know the problem you're trying to solve, you know the outcome you're looking for, and you know the competencies, the knowledge, skills, and ability and behavior that you're looking for that will be able to achieve that result. And so you just ask, tell me about a time when you had to do something through influence. I hearken back to our example early on in our discussion about the CFO, so who has to put in a pricing program. So tell me about a time you had to do an initiative that was outside of your main specialty. Tell me about a time you had to work cross-functionally with people who were uncomfortable with your idea. Tell me about a time, and so on and so on. Those questions are so powerful because the candidate has to think of examples, stories from their previous experience. This allows the hiring manager the opportunity to calibrate what is the candidate saying and what do I need. Does this example come anywhere close to being something I think will solve my organization's problem?
Okay.
That makes sense?
Oh,
I love those questions.
Yeah. Well, let me go to the next one.
Time. Make it timely. Make your process concise and to the point by doing your planning in advance and having everybody who needs to be involved in the hiring process all lined up and prepared. That way you can make the best use of your candidates' times, of the interviewers' times, and fill the job more quickly with the right candidate so that you can begin the work of attacking the problem that needs to be solved. Have I said that enough about this problem that needs to be solved?
I think so. Here comes the next one.
Uh-oh. Connections. So what we've learned is, especially these days, so much even more important than in past years, networking is a critical element in the hiring process. So what we're talking about here is the fact that hiring managers are much more comfortable hiring people that they know or people who become recommended to them. They have an expectation that that person will be able to do the job and fit in with the team a lot better. So build your network. As a hiring manager, you must have a network and talk to your friends and colleagues and people that you know to try to unearth candidates. This will speed along the process as well if you've done your preparation, which is to have a network, particularly on LinkedIn. You must have a network in order to access a network.
So my network is not the applicant tracking system?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I suppose, and I know we're making fun, but I suppose it could be one of the elements. Maybe you want to look at that as well. But you want to access a network so that you can find those candidates that got screened out by your applicant tracking system for no fault of their own.
Okay. Here's our last one.
Communication. Please tell them where they stand in the process. Let them go if you're not going to be serious about them as a candidate, any one individual. You can always stay in touch with them. A good candidate who doesn't fit this job is a perfect networking connection for the future. So there is no wasted effort. But don't take money out of one pocket to pay for the other. Don't rob Peter to pay Paul by having a poor communication process.
So Catherine, you touched on something, and I want to kind of close up our our discussion here around this. So, all right, so I don't hire person A for this position. I've actually had both hiring managers and HR folks and recruiters, not so much, good recruiters anyway. But HR managers and hiring managers will say, well, I didn't hire from this job, and then I got somebody, and they were here 2 weeks, and they vanished on me, and they were my number 2 person, but I won't go pick up the phone and call the number 2 person because I didn't hire them, and that would be just weird.
That's not weird. We should think of every interaction with another person as an opportunity to build a relationship, as an opportunity to stay connected for something that might happen in the future. So if a hiring manager cuts loose someone, hopefully they would have already added that person to their LinkedIn connection. They would be talking to them pro to pro, making sure that they can stay in touch. That could be part of the thanks but no thanks. It could be a personal touch. And that way, 2 weeks from now, if they need to call them, they call the candidate and they say, hey, Joe, we talked, and, it turns out the one I wanted is actually you. I know this might sound weird, but I would love to have you come on in. And because you had a relationship, you can pick it up again. It's not awkward. It is awkward if you have neglected to communicate well, and if you've annoyed them, or if you never communicated.
Right. Yeah? If you have not conducted your process in a professional manner, that's right. What's awkward. It's not awkward that you turned them down and then you're going back to ask them, And look, you and I have both said, geez, these are both great candidates. Flip a coin, right?
Right.
And,
right.
I mean, sometimes it comes down to that, and it's like the coin didn't fall in my favor with the guy or the gal that I picked, so I need to really go a different direction. So if we've done a good job up front, what's the problem? The same guy that talked about high hiring and high firing, he said, Ned, never forget, if you fire someone or if you don't hire someone, he said there's two things that are possible, and one thing that's an always about the after that relationship, whatever that looks like. He said either one of those might become a supplier to us someday. And he goes, I like having really good relationships with my suppliers. He said they might become a customer of mine someday, and I really want a good relationship with my customers. He said, in the off chance that neither of those two things occur, they will always be a mouthpiece about your business.
Exactly.
And he goes, I like people saying good things about my business, regardless of what's happened between us. And what a huge lesson. Here's somebody that could see around the corner in dark without a mirror, and really understood this whole idea of business acumen, that this touches that touches that touches that, and if we do bad over here, it could affect this over here. And so it was, I always thought that was really interesting. Well, we're up to our time. I want to thank anybody who's listened in on the program. Here's contact information for myself, contact information for Catherine. Catherine, you don't take on companies as clients as often in your practice now, do you?
Not as often. I mean, I do it on an occasion, and you and I collaborate occasionally with some of your clients. I'm more than happy to speak to anyone about it.
Build out a good recruiting and maybe teach behavioral questioning, that sort of thing. Okay.
Exactly, especially the questions and the process. That's something that I have a passion for. Right. It would help the candidates so much. It would help the economy. It would help business. It's so important.
Well, I appreciate your taking an hour and coming on and sharing your wisdom and your experience with everyone. And for those of you that are listening, obviously this is on the YouTube channel. We have others up there from the rest of the series. We're going to continue these into next year, so keep your eye open for those. We do have one coming up December 10th on innovation and creativity with a good friend of mine out of southwestern Ohio who travels the country and teaches in the world of design thinking. So that'll be a huge piece of it. So thanks for being here. We appreciate it. Catherine, thank you as always.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all on the next go around.